Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Land Effects webinar. Today we'll be listening to the very special guest and Land Effects guru, Aaron Emerson from Mills Design Group out of Florida. You may recognize his voice from the Site Plans and Land Effects webinar that he gave 1 year ago. If you haven't seen it yet, we recorded it and it is available on our website at landeffects.com/webinars. That is also where this webinar will be posted later today. So if you want to go back and revisit any parts of the presentation, you can do so at any time. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items for all of you live viewers. At the top right of the Zoom webinar window, there is a button to exit full screen mode and go into windowed mode. Additionally, there is a chat box and a Q&A box. If you'd like to ask any questions, please use the Q&A box and we will do our best to answer the questions or get them over to Aaron to answer live when he pauses for questions. So today, Aaron is going to be sharing some tips and techniques that they use when working with the Land Effects detail tools. He's created an amazing setup of shortcut keys and processes for taking their details from an idea to construction document.
Thank you much for I appreciate it. So once again, my name is Aaron Emerson. I work for Mills Design Group. I've been working for Mills Design Group for just over 7.5 years, and we've been doing an amazing amount of projects, and they keep getting more complex and they keep changing year over year. And Paul brought up at the beginning, we were doing our sound check, that I did a webinar right about a year ago. So this fits in pretty well. But a little bit about Mills Design Group. We're a pretty small office. There's about 5 of us designers, and we primarily work in Central Florida and the Caribbean. We do about 60% custom residential and about 40% commercial. And we use all of Land Effects products throughout our design project for commercial residential, the site tools, especially the planting tools, the detailing tools, and we use the irrigation as well too. And I always like to tell this story. It ties in well with this presentation. But when I first started working for Mills Design Group, I was the first employee. But Corey had purchased the planting Land Effects, but he didn't tell me about it. He'd had it for over a year and never really put it to use. And when I started, I was counting plants manually, and I was doing detailing by manually. There was no keying of the details or any kind of noting of any kind. And then I discovered that he had it, and then I learned how to use it, and I integrated it into our workflow, and it has worked out really well for us, just in the efficiencies that it has brought to our design process. So several of the projects that I'm going to cover today. 2 projects, a project we're calling Sea Glass, and then another project that we're calling Blue Planet. And we just received ASLA awards for these projects just a couple months ago. These projects finished up just over a year ago. And the project that you see before you, this is the Oceanside pool. And kind of the main feature of this pool is we used a glass weir that spills over into a trough. A very nice project, very fun project to work with. The builder and the client were really great, as well as the architect as well too. A great design team on this project. And the same can be said for Blue Planet as well. This project is also on the ocean, also has an oceanfront pool, and just like the other project, this project also had a courtyard pool. So this webinar is about detailing. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview of Mills Design Group. I gave you 2 projects, but to get detailing, to get it started off correctly, you got to start at the beginning, which is you got to set up your templates. You got to get your templates set up. I've learned this the hard way. I've ended up having to do it twice. And so the second time I've got a pretty good setup, but it took 2 shots to get everything set up the way I wanted it so that it works nice. And so with that said, you got to learn about the preferences. And the preferences is basically your office standard. Controls your fonts, your dim styles. It's where you kind of load everything that you're going to use throughout your office. It's not project specific. It's not for one project, and then you use something else for a different project. You want to make it your default standard over all of your projects. There are a couple ways to tweak your preference set, and I'll cover that a little bit later. There's you can do a preference set for a specific client, and I'll cover that scenario a little bit later. But on your left, you want to set your detail width. That's your standard width. And then if you look over here at the right, that's kind of your main width. That's your standard size that the majority of your details are going to be. Most of our details are the 1A size, and then the other size we use a lot is the 1B. Primarily, we use that quite a bit, and all that's controlled through your preference set. Other things you can set your arrow style. You can include detail title, ref notes. All those things can be controlled here for setting out your template. I want to jump over to CAD real quick. Just bear with me as I jump around. Sometimes there can be a lag with the internet connection. Oops, wrong CAD. So I was telling you about the detail frame. I created my own custom frame. This happened before I knew about that Corey had Land Effects. Land Effects has this built in. This is what their frame looks like. But I grid everything out so that I can get at the most 16 details per page, or I can customize it. So you get a couple of small details and a couple of big details. And so a full page of details can look something kind of like this. And then another option, you can customize it even further. So there's lots of flexibility in how you do it, but you still need that starting point. If you have a clean starting point, it just makes it easier when kind of going through the detailing process if you have that one place to start from. I'm going to switch back to the presentation real quick. And just like I said before, there's kind of your one frame, and then there's two frames right there. And all of that's controlled through your preference set. Other things that can be controlled through your preference set are your fonts. There's a good example of a font. Your dim style, your leader style. You can set all that up through your template. And once you get that set up, then all your details have a nice, clean formatting. Another feature you can set up is your detail title block. The scale is set up by going through their system. You can customize it. I like to add a note in there. Sometimes I key a detail in with a ref note. It ties that back in with the detail. It doesn't happen for every detail. I'd say probably about 25% of our details, but it's nice having that option. And then also it includes the file name. Typically that's non-plot, so that helps you out when you're kind of working on the details. If you want it to print, it can print that way. Typically, I don't want to see that file name. It's just more questions that we might get from a residential client. Some pitfalls and some learning curves that I've learned over the years with setting up details. And like I said, when I had to set it up twice, I set up a preference set for different sheet sizes. So I had a preference set for 30 by 42 sheet size and a preference set for 24 by 36. It was great for a while. I set it up. It worked great. All of my details lined up nice and neat. However, as you evolve through your design process, as you develop new projects and new clients, you want to go in and make changes. Well, I ended up having two details to go in and make slight changes to versus one detail. So that's probably one of the big things I've learned. Also with various different types of notes, there's a keynote system within the details and bubble callouts, and those can be very unique from one preference set to the next. And it's very tedious to keep all that updated through both preference set. Another thing you have to keep up with through both preference sets are your ref notes. Any kind of custom ref notes have to be maintained continuously with those. These are just two planting details, and really what I want to get at is you see the difference between the detail frame. And then another downside is when you're training new people and you have these different frames, is it never fails. Somebody always grabs the wrong detail frame. They grab the smaller one when they should have grabbed the bigger one, and vice versa. And then if you import details from another project, it's just really easy to get confused, and it's kind of something you want to kind of watch out for. And then let's jump back to CAD real quick. I want to kind of show you a few things on preference that's just easier in AutoCAD. So here's your kind of your detailing ribbon. That's nice. They put the references over here on the far right. Yeah, give it a second, it'll load. And this is kind of a quick view. You can, one thing I do have set up, and you can manage this so that you can write protect your preference set, so not too many people can make changes. So you see how this is grayed out over here on your left. That way you don't have your detail frame suddenly change on you with a new person starting, or even if it's just an accident. So that's one aspect you can change. You can set your dim style, your keynotes, and then you can access your Detail Explorer. Your Detail Explorer is basically your detail library, and I'll cover that towards the latter part of the presentation. Really what we're here for is like, what's our design process for designing details, for designing our projects? What's our flow for that process? And let's jump back over to the PowerPoint. So kind of the detailing design process. This is the Sea Glass project. And like I said in my introduction, this project had two pools. We had a courtyard pool and an oceanside pool. This is the courtyard pool. It's a little bit smaller. This pool is it's raised up about 6 inches. It's got a perimeter overflow. It spills into a trough. And then here in the foreground, there's a set of stepping stones. There's 3 over the main path and the 3 going towards the pool. There's a water feature that runs in between those water features. And so part of that concept, all of our designs start with a sketch. And I apologize for the crease in this image, but I finally found this sketch tucked away in one of my notebooks. Usually they're in the process, we'll sketch out the plan. I start thinking about, or Corey will start thinking about, or another designer will think about how we're going to detail these elements. And everything will start as a quick sketch. And surprisingly enough, I was able to kind of save. I was able to go back and find this detail. But some of the key features is we had a steel edge separating the turf from the water feature, and we were kind of mocking up how are they going to go about building this. Kind of got the steel edge, you got the planted turf with kind of the concrete base. Here's another version. This one took it so kind of another step further, where we start looking at maybe the steel edge has to wrap, and you got the turf, you got the coping. We start looking at the depth of the trough, the width of the trough, just to kind of make sure all of these elements will kind of work out before we really jump into CAD and finalize the details before we present it to the client, the architect, and the builder. Other concepts we've worked on, just wanted to give you some other ideas. These 2 details are kind of work in progress still. The detail on the left, we worked it out, and the client ended up wanting to go in a different direction. That detail never made it into CAD. It's part of the design process. The detail on the right, we're still working through that detail. The project's been through lakefront review. We're still, I think we're wrapping up some of our permitting hurdles with this project. We've done 3D renderings in SketchUp, but pretty soon we'll be jumping into construction documentation and detailing, and we've got the sketch ready to go to finalize those details. A lot of our details do start with a sketch, but some stuff, some of our signage projects with commercial development, maybe we sketch those out. Maybe the sketch isn't as nice or as clean as some of the stuff in my notebook, but we can quickly run through different options in CAD, present a couple of different textures and feels, font styles. Really, the design is basically the same in all those concepts. We're just changing the style and just kind of the entry feel on how that's going to work. So before we jump into AutoCAD and the detailing process and how we build, I want to see if we've had any questions pop up if you've had. If Paul could kind of cue those up. When I was doing my my run-throughs, one of the questions that Amanda had for me is, do we have a checklist for details as we're kind of building details? And really some of the kind of the checklist are more geared towards what details do I need to add to a project, more of a kind of a standard detail. This is a checklist I have. This is pretty much more for some of my commercial projects. It's more kind of a linear process. It's not too much variability, but I have a list of details. I have the order I want them on. I added them to a checklist. It's pretty easy for me to pass this off and train somebody. We want these details on this project. Other checklist items is kind of learning your materials, learning your thicknesses, and how those building elements go together. You can quickly sketch those out. You can learn how those work. Your standard units, like your standard CMU block, your standard paving materials. If you're getting into a new product or a new locale, we rely on our reps, and we call them all the time. We just recently did it. We were working with a tile material we weren't familiar with. We wanted to make sure it could work in a cooler climate. So we're always researching new materials and integrating that into our design process. Are there any questions at this time, or maybe keep rolling on into kind of how we build a detail?
There's no questions coming in live at the moment. I've got a few lined up here, but I think they're more geared towards the actual creation of the detail and sort of practices in CAD itself. So I think I'll wait till after you kind of go through that to see if they're still worth asking.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Well, let's move on to CAD. I want to pull up a real quick picture real quick. Here's a daytime shot of the Sleek Glass project. I want to kind of describe some of the features real quick. So there's the glass edge, the acrylic glass edge around the edge of the pool. This spills off into this trough. And then this is a perimeter overflow pool. So the water spills on all sides of the pool. So all along these edges, the water is spilling over into a gutter or is spilling over into the trough. And then in addition to that, the spa is raised ever so slightly above the deck, and it spills off into a trough as well too. And so let's jump to CAD. I want to describe how we built this detail for this glass edge. Clear this off. So I've already kind of pre-built some of these details, but in case you're wondering, like this detail frame, there's a template set right over here that pulls up this frame. This is how you pick your detail size. Over here on the right is how you pick your detail scale. And I went to the ribbon. The nice thing about the ribbon, everything is organized from left to right. All your project information starts here. That's the beginning of your project. And as you flow through it, you kind of work your way towards the right. I'm a pretty big proponent of shortcut keys, and a lot of my workflow doesn't even involve the ribbon. So I use the detail frame for quite a few things, and I can quickly get to it. Within the shortcuts that I've created for myself, Land Effects has built-in keyboard commands for adjusting the different sizes of these. There's lots of additional information in the power tips and additional webinars on how to utilize these commands. But these keyboard commands are great time savers for adjusting the scale and going back and forth, especially for new users. Kind of learning how to pick that scale is great, and not having to look in a folder and going, oh, which template do I grab for this or that? It's all right there, kind of well thought out. So for this acrylic edge detail, usually for most details, I start out with the basic line work. I do all my basic line work first, and then the next thing I work on is my text size. There's your kind of your annotate up here, and I label everything. This is a pretty basic detail. It went through several revisions to get to this point. The glass was lower down at one point. Through work with the contractor and work with the manufacturer of the glass, we revised our detail throughout the process. The size of the catch basin was worked out with the engineers of the pool. A lot of our projects involve numerous different consultants. In the case of this project, we're heavily involved with the builder. We do a lot of projects with this builder. They're great to work with. They've been a real asset to us in making sure all of our designs come to fruition. The pool contractor, in the case of this project, this was a design build project. So we did all the form and finish work, worked it out with the manufacturer for the glass for this detail to work out. Like I said, then I annotated. At this point, I haven't saved these details into the LandFX system yet. Once I kind of have this worked out, then I kind of reach a point where I'm ready for hatch. I'm ready to make sure I'm good with my scale. Then I'll save it into kind of the detailing system. You got the save detail. If you have multiple detail frames in a drawing, this green line here is your detail frame. You got to tell LandFX which detail. I've already saved it into the detailing system once, so I'm going to select overwrite, or you can select new, as the case may be. I just wanted to make sure I could save it in during the webinar, so nothing would crash. I like to add my initials on who saved it. It goes into the note system within the detail library, so you know who drew the detail. Under description and notes, I like to add the sheet size. I said previously that one of the pitfalls with the way I set up our detailing system originally is I had a detail preference set for the different sizes. Well, kind of my way to compensate for knowing which detail was went to which size, I add it to my notes now. So that when I go back to reuse this detail, or if I reference this detail again, I know that this detail may need to be adjusted in some way to fit on a different title block. Sometimes I will use the check by detail. If I see that I'm revising details a lot, then I'll add my initials to that check by detail. And that overrode the detail. But I want to do that again, and I want to show you kind of the detail library. So I'm going to select new. And typically when you go in and save a detail, you have to pick a place to save it. I'll cover where to save the details a little bit more kind of later on. I really want to kind of cover building the detail, but I want to make sure that you kind of understand you do have to save the detail within the LandFX system. And this is all saved on the LandFX server, whether it's on your local machine or on a server that is shared within your studio. And I have a special folder specifically for the webinar. Save. And then once that detail has been saved, you can abandon kind of this detail frame here. You don't have to go back to it. There are some power tips or there's some ways to save within that detail frame. Typically at this point, I like to place the detail onto my sheet. I want to see how the detail fits. So for example, on this project isn't related to any of the projects I'm showing you, but I like this one because you can quickly tell that a lot of these frames are different. Just with the way this project developed, I was able to kind of customize my frame shape. These frame shapes are a little bit more standard, but you can adjust the frame size after you've saved it into your detail library or your or part of your project. And so once I'm happy with the labeling, once I'm happy with how all this works, then I'll go in, I'll add the hatch. In this case, I froze all the text. It's there, I just turned it off in this detail. And then once I'm ready to finalize it, I start adding all the dimensions. I'll add the water level just to graphically show I got the water level. I'll fill in the hatch. I start adding all the final notes. I add additional notes to just to note that Maybe there's a piece of the detail that's manufactured by somebody else. I'll list that as part of the detail. If there's another engineer involved, I'll start referencing, hey, look for engineering drawings related to this detail. Some other tools that you might need in building the detail. There's some more efficient ways to go about it. A lot of times detailing is very repetitive. For example, a fire pit. We do quite a few fire pits. So Land Effects has a block library. And this is very, very handy. Works best if you kind of develop your own standard for how this works. We do a lot of fire pits. So I've built a number of components to different fire pits. I've built some different burners that I can plug into fire pits. So really, the burner is fairly static. If you go look at different manufacturers, they've got, you know, a 24-inch burner or a 36-inch burner. They've got modular sizes, and then we customize the shape or finish of our fire pit, and then we pick the appropriate burner to match. You know, kind of the various features that are going to be fairly similar, kind of across the board. So here, bear with me while I open the detail builder. I left this organized as it kind of came from Land Effects. I added some of our own folders just to note that some of the stuff that we've added that's been custom. Exterior finishes has been another place where I've added some custom blocks, and these are just custom blocks. The whole detail isn't there, but it's a quick way to add different pieces without having to go, where's that detail? How do I find? We did a fire pit for this other project. Where do I go find that detail? You've got pieces you can start from, and then kind of build it up from there. I do the same thing with different pool coping. I got a perimeter overflow, kind of a Lautner edge. We do a lot of those. I got the basic formwork built into there, and then I can customize that. Is it a stone? Is it going to be a stone edge or a wood edge? Or are they going to use grass? Are they going to use another material for that edge? But I've at least got a starting point, and so that streamlines kind of building your detail. You can also plug in different pots, any kind of manufacturer's detail that you use a lot. Land Effects has different hardware components built into it. I use those a little bit, but really what I find useful are the components of the detail that streamlines building the detail. Other features of building the detail, you'll start out building your detail at a smaller scale. If it's a 3/4 inch detail, but you need to add some additional notes, additional information. They have a great enlargement tool. This is great for blowing up the size of the detail. So this detail has been enlarged. Looks like I enlarged it to 1 inch equals 1 foot within their system. And it plugs in really nice. Once you use the enlargement tool, all the text and the hatch all scales within the detail frame. I did mention it, but speaking of the detail frame, if you're familiar with their work area tools, the detail frame works very similar to how their work areas work. Other aspects of detailing to kind of streamline the process, other tools that I use would be SketchUp. SketchUp is a great way to start a detail. This detail here, this arbor, wasn't sure what the client was going to want. We're ready to kind of start detailing a few features. We're getting our design development drawings going. So I did a perspective export out of SketchUp, and I quickly label everything so the client kind of understands and the builder understands what we're thinking to make sure, is this the direction you really want to go before we really dive into the final details. In the case of this project, this arbor wasn't built, so I didn't invest too much time in detailing out all these little pieces. So on this project, it didn't work out. But on this project, it did. The client really loved this concept. They wanted a swinging daybed and post. This project actually just wrapped up. Fingers crossed, hopefully we can get some really nice photos of this project once the landscape's established. But exported this out of SketchUp, did a quick labels, and then started developing the elevations and the plans and the elevations to get everything keyed out so that the construction documents can be built. As part of that process, we've covered, saving a detail, detail builder annotating the detail, detail enlargements, but then there's keying out the details. So these callouts are built into LandFX. You've got your placeholder callouts. You can have a detail callout, kind of a circle callout. You place these, you locate them within the detail system, and then you place them. I'm going to jump over to a plan view real quick to kind of show you how that works. Oops. Oops, I apologize. That's details. Let's jump back over here. So these call outs were placed here. With the way that I built the webinar, what you can't see is the text, and I apologize for that. But I've got several different projects kind of mushed into one. It's not necessarily the best way to work. Just kind of a quick update on LandFX projects, your project manager. But you want to make sure everything's tied in with a project. Here, just bear with me just a second as this opens. So here's the project manager for this project, and I kind of ran everything through our standard details, and unfortunately, some of my callouts lost out as I plugged in details to show examples. But even though you can't see the numbers, the system still works. So if I go to Edit Detail, it's going to open the detail where this detail lives. So there's a detail, it's saved within the system. This detail lives within our server. It also has a home within the kind of the project system. And pretty soon we're going to be getting to the detail library. I want to jump back over to LandFX and go over some more of the pictures associated with the sea glass project. So this was the oceanside pool. We've already covered the weir with the glass. There's a print version of the detail I showed you how to build. And during the process with how we work with the builder and the client and the architect, we built in a step kind of towards the end, so you can step up, lean over, and have a nice view out overlooking the ocean. There's a detail enlargement. There's the glass. You're looking back towards the planter, and the water is level with the deck. So the water is right level with the deck, and then the spa is just an inch and a quarter just above the water level. There's a construction shot of the pool. There's all the steel, and just a note to kind of reiterate, our responsibility with a lot of our projects is we'll do the design, we'll do the form and finish, but we work with engineers, architects to help us make sure that the pool we're designing will be structurally sound. We work with either a pool designer to work with the water flows, or in the case of this project, it was done design build where they engineered the pumps, the filters, so that the water would work and be easily be maintained by the client and homeowner. And then jumping over to the courtyard pool, the stepping stone detail. I'm going to skip ahead a slide and then jump back. But that's the courtyard pool with the stepping stones. I showed you the sketch, so this is how that detail developed. So there's that sketch again where we did the steel. And there's the kind of refined sketch. There's a night shot of the pool looking back. There's the guest house. The water flows all the way across. So as you interact with this space, you're crossing the water to get to the pool, or you're crossing the courtyard to get to the main house. But over there in the kind of the background, that's the front door to the house. That's part of the arrival sequence. There's kind of the finalized detail. We had the turned down steel edge. There was all the construction documents. Then we turned all that over to the builder, the contractor, for them to build the detail. I want to take this time to see if there's any questions regarding kind of detail construction. Some of the questions that Amanda had, we were doing kind of our run through. I was going to run through those questions real quick. She said we use troughs a lot in our pool designs, and she wanted to know if I had any tips or detailing troughs. To me, that kind of goes hand in hand with stepping stones. Usually, the width of the step plays a critical role. I'd say around 4 to 6 inches is what we like to use. You don't want to go too deep. 9 inches tends to work out pretty well with this detail here. And then I brought it up a little bit when I was talking about this pool, but I want to read this question off. How flexible are we with going from detail to construction? Do we have any on-site changes? Is there a process for the change? And then do contractors suggest change? There's always a process for change. If there's one thing that's a constant is there's going to be a change to what we've done conceptually to what we've built. One of the nice things about the relationships we've developed with the architects and the builders is usually when we conceptualize something, the client is going to go through with the design. We conceptualized the features of this pool. We worked out all the engineering with the glass, and the client, fell in love with it, and they were willing to make the investment to spend the money on their house and make those work. And throughout the design process, we worked with the manufacturers to adjust the height of the glass, any kind of stepping stones, just to make sure these projects would kind of come to fruition. Are there any other questions, Paul, that I need to touch
Yeah, there's a couple here. While you're on this subject, or you just covered the subject of your troughs, we had a question that came in on sort of like the safety of that, because we saw in the I think it was the Sea Glass project that had the trough going right up to the turf, and then of course there's a lot of glass. Are there any issues you've had with either safety regulations or how maybe I guess consideration of safety has sort of influenced your design on such cool designs?
Absolutely. Safety, even working in the Bahamas where we have the ability to kind of push that safety factor, but that's always something that you bring up with the client. Are you comfortable with this design? Stepping stones, they do pose a little bit more, I guess risk is the best word, but if you're careful, if you're aware of it, then the client is willing to make those changes. There were no particular code issues with this project. The ministry didn't have any issues with these projects. Typically, when we do a lot of our designs, we work with our local code, which would be Florida. A lot of our heights, we typically don't exceed any kind of fall heights associated with what we have here in the States. That's just easier for us to communicate to the builders and to the clients. Most of our clients are from the States, and they're already familiar with those codes. And like I said, like this 9 inches, this isn't too bad. I don't like going too far on the spacing because then it's a little bit easier to step in. And then for our clients with kids, some of our clients are very safety conscious, and they're like, no, we don't want any stepping stones. We have kids, and that's just something we don't want in our pools. And if that's one of the requests, then we'll design around those parameters. But you always want to bring those things up with your client and make sure they're aware of those features. And then with the material surfaces we use, even if there isn't a specific kind of slip resistance, we always want to make sure that people aren't going to slip, or especially with the water is always very close. We want to make sure the water is either sloped towards the pool or away from the pool, and whichever case applies to them. You still don't want to create any kind of slippery condition outside, whether there's a code for it or not. That's really not good design.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And another one in here, I know you showed starting in SketchUp and as a way to a good starting point to create your details. But a user did ask if you develop any details in any sort of other 3D programs, or does the finished product typically come out of CAD?
So in the past year and a half to 2 years, we have gone from SketchUp. We were using Shader Light, and we have recently started integrating Lumion into a lot of our projects. So we are heavily using Lumion a lot for photo 3D realism. That is not necessarily my specialty in the office anymore of doing the SketchUp. I'm doing more project management, but we've got a number of great designers that are using that tool extensively. And as we've been, submitting lots of photos, lots of examples back to Land Effects to share with everybody. And over the next year, we're going to have some really great projects that are in the process of wrapping up or going into construction documents. So we'll have more to share on that front in the future. But our clients are really receptive to the photo 3D realism. It's before we had heavily relied on character images, going online and searching for just the right character image. But with the photo, but with what we can get out of Lumion, then our ideas, our sketches can really sell what we're trying to build. The contractors and clients can take a look, and we can coordinate with them better as well too.
Okay, so for rendering, sometimes there's a 3D element to it, but for the actual details and construction documents, it's pretty much solely done in CAD.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I think that answers that question. All right, that's probably fine for now.
Okay. I believe the next step that I haven't talked about is the library. Where do you store your details? How do you organize your details? Let's switch back over to PowerPoint real quick and make sure I have my slides queued up. Detail library. So the detail library is called Detail Explorer in Land Effects, and kind of a little bit of background information as we're talking about the library. In previous places I've worked, usually detailing has been where an entry-level person kind of starts out working. That's where I started out working. And it was always, where do you go find the detail? Which detail do I use? And it was, we really like the details in this project. Let's use those details. Any kind of standard details. Well, just go to that project and do a save as. Not necessarily the best CAD practices. There's files can get corrupted. You can carry the same style from one project to the next. That isn't really the best way to manage your styles, your templates. So part of the detail library also kind of ties in a little bit with the template. But for Land Effects, I wasn't really sure kind of the best way to organize our library. At the time, it was really just me working on stuff. And so kind of the way I thought about it was, maybe I just need to organize everything by category. So I started thinking about fire pits, pools, water features, and I really wasn't thinking about organizing it per project because I figured at some point we'd want to hire somebody. And I didn't want to have to tell them, well, go look in the Arnott project, or don't you remember the old Smith project? And it's like, I have no idea. And they're like, I have no idea where that project is. But it's easy to tell somebody, go look in the fire pit detail. We've got several projects in there. They're all very similar. And it's very easy to kind of focus what you're looking for. The other types of, so that's category-based details. The other thing you want to think about when doing a detail library are detail types. And so in our office, we basically have three types. We have standard details and custom details, and we have cut sheets or manufacturer's details. Within our standard details, that's your planting details and your irrigation details. Those details really aren't going to change that much. That's your standard tree staking, shrub spacing, those sort of details. They're going to be pretty standard from one project to the next. It's going to be, you're going to plant a tree the same way from a residential project to a commercial project. Other details that tend to stay fairly constant are our flat work details, our stepping stone details. Those all stay the same as well too. And then another set of details that tend to stay the same is I've developed an organization system for client details. We got one specific client. They have what they call their any site plans, and they have a set of plans they want all of their consultants to use, whether it's a Mills Design Group or another LA or another engineer. And so I took all their details, I set them up for the line effect system. So from every project, I can always use the same detail. And the client was blown away by the system that they have all their other consultants kind of reference those details. They may or may not use land effects, but they use all of our details just because everything was so well organized. And then kind of within our detailing process, I would say 75% of our details are custom details. We're doing very unique details from planting pot details, different structures, our pool details. We've got hundreds of pool details. One of the questions that Amanda had for me was like, she was like, how many details have you done? And I haven't counted recently. At one point, I went through a process and I tried to PDF print all of our details, and I was able to get through almost around 2,000 details. And that was several years ago. So I'm sure we've done several hundred details since that time frame. But as you can see here, I have our details. I wanted those to default towards the front, to the top of the list. So I made sure I gave them a letter designation so they would be towards the top. And then I organized everything by category. And as that developed, that worked out very well. One feature I had to add to it, though, was the standard detail. I want to kind of switch over to CAD real quick because it kind of helps demonstrate what I'm talking about a little bit better. And I want to, once again, I use a lot of shortcuts, but I have a shortcut for the Detail Explorer. I use it all the time. The Detail Explorer is on the left. You got your kind of your Detail Manager and then your Detail Explorer. And your Detail Explorer is, like I said, it's your library. This, I didn't change it too much from how it came from Land Effects. I left either standard details. There's a CSI-based system. I think I said that right, down towards the bottom. It doesn't really fit in with our system. Land Effects has some details they plug into their system. Every so often I go in and I check that to see if anything's been uploaded, but I made sure all of our details showed up towards the top. There's the majority of our categories. I thought this system might fail initially when I thought of it, but it's worked out really well. I'm able to train people pretty quickly on where to save details. There's no hierarchy to who can save details. Anybody can go in, draw a detail, and save it into our system. Anybody can go in and edit a detail. You do have to explain that when you have a detail assigned to a project, if you edit that detail, it's like editing an XREF. If that detail is associated with another project, then it's going to change all of those projects. And for the most part, the way the rule works is our planting details and our irrigation details are pretty much the standard, like the same detail is used in every project. But any kind of hardscape detail, we always save a copy because it's really easy to go, oh, the stepping stone spacing, this project needs something different. This stepping stone is going to be clad in a different material. This finish is going to be totally different from this project. This contractor wants to build it slightly different. And I have found that it's really easy to override kind of some of our flat work details. So any kind of standard flat work detail, pool detail, what I've done is any kind of detail that we've used as a good starting point, say like a pool coping. I have a starting point. These are the details you come in and start with. And then you copy that detail, you place it into another project. And then within the categories, we have kind of the project name. Now you're probably thinking, well, what if you have a really big project and you've got a client that's doing pools, columns, flat work? In that case, if it gets to be, or it looks like it's going to be a full service project where there's going to be a lot of details, where we're going to have multiple pages of details, then I've had to kind of adapt the system and have an organization system based on a project. So I split it up between commercial projects and residential projects. And then within those projects, I'll have different categories: pool details, water feature details. And as those details develop, if it's a really good one, you can move it into kind of your main library. And that's the kind of the library system that's worked really well for us over the years. It's very easy to train people on, and it's been pretty easy to keep up with. One other point to mention on the detail system: as you're going through the construction process and the design process, it's always important to back up and archive your details. The details are saved as blocks and drawings. Let me jump over to a project real quick. So these details here, for example, we use the sheet set manager quite a bit for organizing our sheets, our site plans, our planting details. It's a quick way to print. I just kind of bring that up as a side point, but we also use that feature to archive our projects. If we archived our details using that system and you had to go back because the client was, no, I really like that detail you did for me 2 weeks ago, that's the one that's going to work best for us. And you go back to your archive and you open it and you don't back up your details through Land Effects. And let me show you what I'm talking about real quick with that. If you go to your Land Effects projects, say you pick a project and you go to backup, you want to be able to back up your details. And you want to, in our office, we back our details up and we back up our sheet set and our CAD every time we have a revision. So whether that revision is listed on our title block or whether it's an internal revision, if we're going through the process, we really need to design this a different way. We kind of pick a point, archive the details, archive the project, just so that we can go back to any point we need to and find something that we may be missing. Oops, excuse me. I also believe you can go through and manually export details if you need to send them to a client or if you need to send them to somebody else in another office. You can pick a project, you can click export, and you can export all the projects from that category. I think it takes a little bit for it to pop up, but you can export those details. You could probably even develop a system here to archive your details, but it's definitely something that that's important for me to mention. Let's see here. Check my notes real quick to make sure I haven't forgot anything. Client details. So we have a particular client. This is something that has worked great within Land Effects. I want to go back to AutoCAD. And this is a little different than everybody understands standard details and custom details and the category. But specifically for this one client, I developed a whole detail library, and all of these details are formatted per the client's design guidelines. They've got a whole set of guidelines that they want their details. They got different design elements. They got a certain edge condition. They got certain ways they want their trees planted, certain components of how it's staked. And they got a particular brand of irrigation head and some other notes and construction procedures. And so I have a whole category of details that I have utilized to build other details. And I bring that up. You can plug that into your detail library. It's part of a standard. You can also set up project templates when you start a project. Sorry for all the hopping around, but in your project list, if you scroll down to the bottom of your list, we've got a set of standard templates. So for this project here, when I start this project, those details are always associated with that project. So just the workflow and the way to streamline the workflow is really simple. And if they ever want to come in and add a detail or tweak a detail, you go in, you make the change, you include it with that template, and it's ready to go for the next project. We do anywhere from 6 to a dozen projects with this particular client every year, and we're able to stay on top of everything that they need very efficiently. Oops, sorry. I want to show you. And there's kind of an example planting set of details. This is kind of how those details, this isn't necessarily those details, but this is how that system would work. those details are already set up within the template. And then there's a great there's a great power tip on how to set up a template CAD file with your details already loaded. And then you go and you associate that detail set with a project, and it automatically loads those details. I'm kind of rusty with that process, or I would go through it. That webinar does a much better job. That power tip, does a much better job than I can at going through that. And then let me jump back into PowerPoint. Oops, sorry. And then one question, I think I may have touched base on it, but something that Amanda had wanted me to ask was kind of what's our office process for standard details and who saves it. And it's really pretty open. Everybody needs to have access to the details. It can't just be one person saving details. We need to be, we're in a pretty small office, so we need to be flexible. Somebody might need to save details. Sometimes I might need to go in and save details. Detailing it really is one of my favorite things to do. I've always enjoyed it and enjoy working with the details in the construction process and making sure all those nuts and bolts really fit in nice. We have a red line process. Everybody really takes part in the red line process. Corey and myself go through and redline all of our details. Everything gets checked in our office. We typically coordinate a lot of our details with structural engineers and the architects and the builder. If anybody has any questions, it's a phone call is always best to kind of work through things, and then we make whatever changes we need to address a discrepancy. And then I'm coming up on an hour, so if there's any last round of questions, feel free to ask. I had one project. I never really got a chance to it. I thought I would have a little bit more time. I filled my time a little better than I really thought I would. But this is the other project, project we got an award on this year, the Blue Water Project. This is the Oceanside pool. And we had a pool and a spa. The spa is a perimeter overflow. It's got a very narrow slot drain. Get the laser up. The pool, this was a good example of a change in the field. The client liked our design, but he wanted the water raised. So they made a field change, and they turned it into a perimeter overflow pool. And it's just a really elegant, it looks really nice when you're looking out over the water. Got the Ipe deck built into the pool deck. This is synthetic grass. There's a detail perimeter overflow on the spa. There's a very narrow slot drain. There's a synthetic grass on the sides, and then a decorative band on the side. There's an enlargement of that feature. There's the spa. There's the kind of the narrow trough, beach pebbles, and then the synthetic turf. Construction photo. There's the formwork for the spa, and then they're still even installing some landscape even at this point. And that wraps up everything that I had to present. Are there any questions?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones here. So I know earlier on you mentioned bringing in a scan of your sketches to work with that, and I'm guessing that's just kind of like a reference that you have, and
Correct.
You just kind of look at it. Have you had any experience using a PDF import or any kind of image references that are actually used within the detail? Or how would you go from PDF to making a detail?
I have, and I didn't talk about it because of my time, but I can show you real quick. So one thing I've used that for is I ended up with a set of construction documents from a contractor. And one thing that we're always struggling with is how do you hide the pool equipment? And so I imported I'd use the PDF import, and I grabbed their line work because they had done a really, really good job of drawing their pumps and their filters and their heaters and the piping. And I'm slowly learning and training myself in how all of the pool stuff works. I still have a lot to learn in that department, but I was able to use the PDF import, and I've used it, and I was able to save blocks into the detail system. And I got put on the spot. Where did I save those blocks? But I'm pretty sure I saved those here in the utility, maybe. Here's one version. I keep tweaking them as I learn about them, but I imported this from a CAD drawing. I imported this from a PDF. I changed the line work. I cleaned it up so I can drop it in. And mostly I did it as a frame of reference because you got to locate the pool equipment in the side yard. Can you screen it? Do you have room for all the landscaping? Because nobody wants to look at the equipment. And in some cases with our neighborhoods, there's HOA requirements to screen the equipment. And then the clients, they don't want to see it when they're interacting with their space. Did I answer the PDF import question? It's over here under imports. It works out really well.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah, it's definitely a good idea to bring in that line work and kind of alter it so that it fits the needs for use within Land Effects versus pasting like a raster image within. Yeah. And then do you commonly link your details with ref notes, and do you have the benefits for that?
I do. I use that a lot. And so really the big benefit, and bear with me a second because I thought I had something queued up to share. And I can demonstrate that benefit, or the benefit that I like the best. And that is with the shortcut keys. The nice thing, if we go to the FX detail ribbon, you have edit detail. So if you take the time to fully integrate ref notes, your hardscape, and you tie everything in with your detailing system, what Paul is talking about, when you run your ref note schedule, you can include a detail. So with this G201 yard drains detail, I have that set up to where somebody says, hey, we got to change this catch basin. You can go to edit detail, click your block if you have everything tied in, and you can automatically get to your detail, make whatever changes you need to without having to open your detail sheets. Maybe somebody else is working with that within that file. You need to do some work share within your office. You can quickly get to that detail. And I did all of that with shortcut keys. It's something that takes a little bit of time to train yourself on. It works great. It's fabulous. And I think there's been a new feature that's rolled out recently with call out preview. And I think you can click on the same thing. Now it pulls up the ref notes. I think that works on your call outs. If you're not sure which detail you need to edit and you want to look at the slide, or has the detail been edited? Did the person you delegate to modify the detail, did they modify it correctly? You can quickly do a preview. Of course, they have to save the detail and override it within the system for the slide to be updated. But those are some benefits that I see in linking details with ref notes and vice versa. Did that answer the...
Definitely, yeah, very cool. I'm glad you showed off that call-out preview as well. It's pretty neat. Okay, so at this time, if there's any last questions, send them in real quick because it seems like we're just about to wrap this up.
And as you're waiting on questions, I had one thing that I flubbed on my last presentation, and I wasn't ready for a question from Jeremiah. And he wants to know what my wish list items were. And one thing I've struggled with, and it never occurred with me until just recently, but when I'm telling people to add details to a project, that they what they're doing is, they're going to the detail manager, and they're going to, and you want to click new. And for some reason, new isn't highlighted, probably because this project's locked and it's not going to let me add details. There we go. So when you add a detail to a project, you click new. You're not really making a new detail, you're adding a detail to the project. So that's one of my wish list items that I kind of want to throw out there, that go in and change that button to add detail to project. I think it would be a little easier. I had people importing projects. I had people going off in all sorts of different directions when really the new button was what they were looking for.
Okay, yeah, I've written that down, and certainly we can talk about that. Okay, cool. That was great. I had a lot of fun listening to that. I'm glad to see all the systems and actually being used for really cool projects. Before we depart, I just wanted to give a shout out to our phone app. We have a LandFX app, and if you don't have it yet, you should check it out. It is a great way to view our power tip videos that Aaron mentioned. We send those out every week, and if you are on your phone on the fly, maybe you take public transportation or whatever, you can watch those on the go on your phone. We also send out our newsletters and all of our various announcements and updates on it, as well as our events. So say, for example, the ASLA in San Diego coming up. We've got some news on that and some details on the party that we'll be having afterwards. So all of that fun information can be found on the phone app. So grab that if you don't have it already. And unless Aaron has any parting words, everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time to listen. And if you have any questions, pass them through LandFX or pass them through me. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yep. So send an email to support@landfx.com. And Aaron, thank you so much for giving this presentation. We really appreciate it.